Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Lori Ames. Those of you who know the show know that Grace Under Pressure deals with the themes that we too often dismiss, the soft stuff, the caring, the connecting, the commitment we exert toward others. And when you do it as a leader, it means you have to up your game to bring people together. So welcome, Lori.
Thank you for having me, John. I'm so glad somebody dropped out and I was your only choice to fill in at the last minute.
You're not supposed to say that.
Too bad. No filter. No filter.
No, as you might have picked up, Lori and I know one another, and we were talking before that we have worked together for 8 years now, isn't it?
So just about, I would guess. Yeah.
Good. So I want to tell you all about it. Lori Ames is a book publicist. She's represented 6 books of mine, which I always say, and I recommend her highly to all of my colleagues. And I say the only deficit is that other than working with me, she has no deficits. She graduated from Hofstra. I'm not going to say the year because I think it was 1995, something like that.
Thank you. I love you, John.
Yeah. She's been in book publicity since 1970, whatever, in the 80s. She's worked for the big houses, publishing houses, as well as the big agencies. But some time ago, 10 years ago, she migrated back to her hometown, and she created an agency called the PR Freelancer, which is a book publicity firm. A little bit of a backstory of Lori. In 2010, her son, Rob, was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. But fortunately, things have worked out. He's received great medical care and loving care from mom. And so he's doing fine, as is Lori. And Lori, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
So, thank you so much, John.
Great. The pandemic has turned our world upside down. No surprises. How has it affected book publishing?
Well, I can only do it from an external view, but the spring was tough. A lot of publishers postponed books. So in April and May and June, a lot of those books were pushed to September, October, November. So for us, it created a bit of a logjam because we had books signed up and then we had all these other books that were postponed. So it was a little hectic for us. I've been following the reports on Publishers Weekly. Bookstores have been having a tough time, the independents. So everybody support them, please. But publishing, it rebounds from all sorts of different things. So years ago, they said the Kindle was going to kill printed books, and it didn't. And COVID is not going to kill book publishing.
Great. Well, I'm told in many ways people are reading more. That's what I'm hearing from multiple sources, and I want to believe it because I'm an author.
Well, there's not a lot to do. Things are opening up in bits and pieces all around, and I think that during the quarantine, yes, probably people were reading more, watching more TV, figuring out how to homeschool kids, figuring out how to work from home. This 2-week quarantine turned into a year. So people adapted and realized that they can be flexible and resilient.
Right. Well, one of the things that has happened, and I know I get it from my colleagues, and it's writing a book, whether it's a first book or a second book or a 10th book. And so often, what's the biggest misconception that authors have about their book, Lori?
Well, in the business book space, which is my favorite space, we play in the nonfiction book space, and I do a lot of business books. I think that if you're coming at it from a thought leadership point of view, that's fine. It's the people who I think are trying to write memoirs or stories that are more legacy books for their families that aren't going to play well in a public space. I think they're disappointed when they try to find a publisher or they self-publish it and it doesn't sell. So your book has to have a message that the reader is going to take away and use. And sometimes memoirs really are written for the family.
Right. That's a good point. Now let's focus on the business book because that's what you've helped me with. And a misconception authors have is that my publisher will take care of everything.
Oh, those days are long gone. There are publishers that do take care of everything, but many of the publishers are short-staffed. The marketing departments and the publicity departments are the first to get cut. And many authors do need to find a publicist to work with them. And it has to be a good fit. It has to be a personality fit. It has to be an emotional fit. It has to be a financial fit. And the best thing you can do when you talk to a book publicist is to tell them what your goals are. Because a lot of authors don't think about their goals. They wrote a book because everybody said, write a book. This is what's going to make a difference to your business. But what is your business? What do you want your business to be in 5 years? What is the book going to do? Is it going to be your big business card? Is your goal to sell a lot of copies? If your first goal is to sell a lot of copies and be on the bestseller list, if you come to somebody like me, I'm going to recommend another agency. I want authors who want to use it as a brand builder, who want to use it as the biggest business card they've ever had, who want to keep their name in print. And those are some of the things we've done for you. Just make sure the name is always visible. You have a lot of outlets yourself where you write for Forbes and you write for Smart Brief and you do these things, but a lot of authors don't have that. And for new authors in particular, it's hard. It's a very, very busy playground and you have to stay 6 feet apart.
Right. Busy playground and staying 6 feet apart. I love that. And I think the thing is that we authors, I know, we work hard on what it is we do. And especially that first book, it comes out of us and it's like, wow, the world's just going to race out and get it and it's going to fly off the shelves. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So that's why I always recommend when someone talks about a book is they must have a book publicist. And I'll just say this, I can say it and you can. I have referred many people to you and they always come away, whether they work with you or not, they come away with, Lori really helped me. And what you did was what you just told us. You helped them think through the process, which is why am I doing this? And a book is really, to use the parlance of today, a side hustle, is it not? So,
I like to call it a business card.
Yeah.
It's a big business card. It's not really a side hustle because you're using the book as a stepping stone or a stairway to something else. Wow. And a lot of the authors I talk to, look, I have a magic wand. Sometimes I can wave it and make magical things happen. Other times I can't. I mean, we're working with a first-time author where we basically hit a home run for him, which doesn't always happen with first-time authors. There was a story in Forbes and an interview in Fast Company. I can't remember the last time we've had the 2 Fs. We love those. Mm-hmm. But even for established authors, those are good hits. And it's not just the coverage, it's how you use it. If you have an interview and you just leave it out there and you don't share it on social media, you don't put a link on your website, you don't use it as part of your own sales package, it's just going to lay out there and nothing's going to happen and you're going to be disappointed.
Right. Well, I guess what I meant by side hustle, I was trying to be clever, and I guess I was too clever. I was just trying to sound hip. It's the first time I ever said side hustle. Anyway, so
well, at your age, hip could be a very dangerous word. Be careful.
That's true. So anyway, but what I meant was when you're doing a book and launching it, particularly, it's a business.
Yes.
And as a business, it requires an investment, which is in a publicist, but also just in your investment of time and as just you said, the follow through. And it's there are promotional activities too. So I think the biggest thing that first time authors face is or even a second time author who's had a unhappy experience, their first launch didn't work well or the book didn't go anywhere, but they haven't shied away yet. So and I think you keep people grounded. So
I try to, and it's a big time investment because these days so many outlets want you to create guest content. And creating content is mentally taxing, and it's very, very time consuming. And there are ways around some of that by repurposing material from the book, but we can have a campaign where we have 10 requests for articles. If you don't have the time to do that, it's a different kind of campaign, and you might think you have the time to do it at the beginning.
And
until you have to start to do the writing. You write, how many articles do you write where you have to create original content now? And you've been doing this for a very long time. It's not just, okay, I'm going to take 20 minutes and write an article.
Right. Well, let's explore this guest content concept, because if you're a first timer or it's new to you, you're unfamiliar with the term. So what does it mean to contribute guest content?
There are blogs and publications that will ask for an article, for an author or a contributor to write a guest article. They're usually between 600 and 800 words, and every article has to be a little bit different. There can be, bullet points that are the same that carry over from one piece to the other, but you don't want to have duplicate content, because then your search engine aggregators won't pick it up as something new. It won't get promoted properly. It won't go up in the SEO. There's 1,000 things you have to think of. And that's why you need somebody to do the thinking for you and to pick the opportunities that are going to work best for you.
Well, I mean, that's a great point, Lori, because I think you work in two ways. You work strategically. What's the big picture? What do you want to accomplish with your book? And then what cuts you apart from many people is the tactics, one of which is guest content. Tell us about the blogosphere. Excuse me, not the blogosphere. We talked about that. The podcast world. Is that? Tell me about that.
There are more podcasts now than ever before, because in addition to writing books during quarantine, everybody started a podcast. So for some clients who want to do as many podcasts as possible because they're using the podcast to promote themselves on their platforms, and that's how they're building up their brand, we'll set up podcasts with anybody who has a podcast. Mm-hmm. But for authors who are busy or a little bit more established, or for you, for example, we'd be a little bit more selective because we don't want to waste anybody's time. Everybody's busy. If we're representing you, you're running a company, you're running a consulting firm, you're credentialed in some way, and we are trying to fit important things into your schedule that are going to help you grow your business.
And I want to point something out, and I had forgotten. You actually come to this business from, quote, the other side, because you have worked for a publisher as well as you represent a publisher, or have. Am I still correct?
I definitely come from a publishing background. I was at William Morrow for 6 years, back a ways. And then I was at a boutique book publicity agency for almost 20 years. Most of my clients now these days are individual authors, but I have in the past represented on a retainer basis 2 or 3 smaller to mid-sized publishers where we would publicize select books for them. And in those cases, we treated everything the way we would if it was an individual author, just doing as much as possible, but also teaching along the way. This piece is good, this piece wasn't. I'm not afraid to ever listen to an author's interview and suggest different tactics or answers or methodologies in going about doing the interview. A lot of times for a new author, we'll do media prep, because somebody might be really good about talking about their company, but there are times when you've written a book and you actually haven't looked at it for about 1.5 years. So if somebody's asking questions, there are ways to answer, and then there are ways not to answer.
Right. I learned something from my original contact to you, and she deserves a shout out, and Irene Magic from AmCom. And she had this thing about 10 big things about your book. And so what I do when I write something, I interview myself. And now, yes, I'm an egotist, but it's actually...
but the best kind.
Yeah. Actually, it gives you great, and I recommend this to any author. Once you've written your book and it's on its way, Interview yourself about what you wanted to accomplish in the book. It'll get your thoughts down on paper, and it'll help you in interviews. Does it not, Lori? So.
It most certainly does. Also, to shorten your answers. Some interviews are only 10 minutes. You can't give a chapter's length answer in a short period of time. I'll never forget, I worked with, years ago, Steve Carmen, and he wrote I Love New York. He wrote a lot of commercial jingles, but he went to high school with, I'm going to say Bobby Darin, and I hope I'm not wrong. And we would practice doing interviews where he would have to get in that name and a commercial name and the name of the book over and over and over again, so that every question, hi, what did you have for breakfast? Well, when I was in high school, we did this. And it's just a practice mechanism to not get taken out into left field.
Right.
And because we have so many leadership books, sometimes authors get asked political questions that they don't want to answer or get involved in. And we practice saying that is a really fascinating question. But what's more important is, and then taking it back where the author wants to go. Just because you're being interviewed doesn't mean that the host is the boss of you.
That's a very important point, and learning an interview, and it's you. I like the way you just said the interviewer is not the boss of you, so answer it the way you want to answer it. So that's a good one, and it's important. But it's important because that's integral to your brand, as you said at the very outset, is it not? So.
Yes, and sometimes you feel compelled to answer the questions you're asked. And if you watch any politician, you know that nobody ever answers the questions they're asked. And it's okay for authors also.
That's true. What's the biggest misconception that authors have about book publicity? So.
That a book publicist is going to make the book a New York Times bestseller.
So what does it take to become a New York Times bestseller? So.
These days, I don't even know.
Yeah. It's a very good answer, because I kind of think it's like it's hitting the lottery in a way. I mean, you do the work, but it's part of the luck.
There are ways to hit the list that I will not go into here because I don't think they're ethical.
Yeah.
A lot of times you can hit the list if you're doing a lot of speaking and there are a lot of bulk purchases. I like the purchases to be real purchases. So 25 years ago, you could actually sell a lot of books and hit a bestseller list. It's much, much harder today.
Right.
And there many authors are writing books to get the next big client or the next big speaking engagement or the next big consulting gig, not necessarily to sell books to be on the bestseller list.
And that's an interesting thing, because when people ask me about writing books, I think any independent, certainly anyone in the field of human development, being an executive coach or being working in human development, whatever it is you do, or certainly a speaker, knows they have to, feels compelled to write a book. And one of the first things I say is, why do you want to do this? Because it's okay not to write a book. So.
But I think that the misconception out there is that they need to write the book. And then maybe it's not a misconception. Yeah. If a major company is looking for somebody to come in and do training, and they Google you, what are they going to see as last? That somebody in Forbes mentioned your book, or that you have a website? It's, you have to weigh what your goals are. And I think that's really important. And many times authors don't know when they come to me or to any publicist really what the underlying goal is.
Right. And that's what you excel at, is helping. I mean, you're actually coaching them through the publicity process. So you are a book publicist / executive coach in books.
And much to the dismay of many, I don't have a filter. So if it's in my head, it's going to come out of my mouth, whether you want to hear it or not.
Oh, that's what we love about you, because it's honesty and it's truth. And you have no trouble speaking truth to power.
I'll say thank you.
But it's getting back to why to write a book. But I honestly do come back. And then you said it, there is a reason for it. And I say, while I say, you sure you want to do it? Then I say, if you feel compelled that you have to write it, then you must write it. And that's important. Now let's do one of the something on a side skip here. What role do ghostwriters play in business books? So,
a lot of times ghostwriters will ghostwrite books for CEOs who just don't have the time to write a book, or who may not have the skill to write a book. They can also ghost for consultants. The right ghostwriter and the right author together can create an amazing piece of work. They really can. Ghostwriters are not a dirty word in any way.
No, and I'm glad. No, and I have recommended them. In particular, I always say a ghostwriter can do everything or very little. And what do I mean by that is soup to nuts your book, but also maybe coach you through the process, help you with the outline. And I have found, Lori, and you and I have had this conversation that we work with people, we know people, and they are very, very good at what they do as a consultant, a speaker, whatever. But getting words on paper is a little difficult for them.
Yeah.
And so I said, hire a ghostwriter. Because, if you've been talking about writing your book for a period of years, something's holding you back. And whatever that is, a ghost can help you. I firmly believe that. What do you think?
I agree with you 100%. And sometimes the thing holding somebody back is that they don't know who's going to read it or why they're writing it or what they're going to say that's different. And until they start writing, they're not going to know either. It's getting the words on the paper, and the ghostwriter can draw that out by asking strategic questions, by creating outlines and filling in gaps. And you can reach a certain point, maybe just have a ghostwriter work with you on a proposal. And when you look at the proposal, you'll decide if this is really going to be something, or if maybe it was a nice idea, you gave it a shot, and you don't want to devote the time and finances to it.
I had never thought about ghostwriting proposals, but I like that because I hate writing proposals. But it's actually interesting. I've often encouraged people to get a ghostwriter to help them with the outlining, but it can also be the reverse. You do the outlining, and they can help with the fleshing it out. So,
Exactly. Sometimes it's, you have the idea in your head, and you just can't get it on paper, or you don't think there are enough words on paper, and that's where a ghostwriter can help.
Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You have been in business, you told me, just 10 years. So
Yes.
Through some challenging times. So I always describe you as not simply a book publicist, but a savvy business professional, an entrepreneur. So as an entrepreneur, as a business professional, what's the vibe and Lori is joining us from Long Island, New York. So what are you observing, Lori?
Well, right now, many small businesses are suffering, but the service businesses, a lot of them, we were very, very slow in the spring, like everybody else. But I prospected the entire time. Books were still being written. Publishers were still out there pushing their books off. So we started off 2021 quite strong. So that was a good thing. Small businesses have to be very creative. If you're in the retail space or the restaurant space right now, those poor people are suffering to no end. We do everything we can to support local. I belong to my local Chamber of Commerce, even though I have no clients on Long Island. My clients are global. I have clients in California. I have clients in Moscow. So, I can run an international business from my tiny little space here in Babylon. But we also get media coverage in the US and the UK and India. It's very, very broad based. So you have to sometimes just think outside your space a little bit.
No, that's great, and I think that's also the one of the if I were to look up the word resilience in the dictionary, I think there's a picture of you, not only your business savvy, but the challenges you went through with Robert. So.
Yes, I was working in the city at a boutique agency. I had been there for almost 20 years, and Rob was diagnosed with an inoperable malignant brain tumor 3 weeks after his 22nd birthday. And I sat in the hospital room staring at him, laying in bed with tubes and shit all over the place. And he had 4 brain surgeries and 3 rounds of chemo and 5 weeks of cranial radiation, and he had to relearn to walk and he had to relearn to talk. But in between 2 of his procedures, he said, "Mom, you have to go to work." I always worked. He knew that he would have to be really, really sick for me to be home and sitting there. So I basically started my business from his hospital room using my iPad and LinkedIn.
Well, I don't think I've heard of a business starting in a hospital room, but that's a good one. See, I told you you're resilient. Not only are you resilient, you are creative. And Rob works with you today, correct?
Yes, he does. He does. He knows a lot of our media contacts. They know his story. They'll call and chat with him. He does a lot of the email outreach where if we have a set list, there's an email set up and he's able to just email it out. And luckily he loves to cook, because otherwise we'd all starve to death and I wouldn't have a place to live because I'd burn the house down. The Long Island Press had done a story about us about a year after I started my business when Rob was doing well, and the outtake quote in yellow highlighted is, "Boy survives brain tumor, killed by mom's cooking."
That's a good one. I love that. Yeah. And your humor always keeps me coming back. You and I always enjoy our conversations.
Yes.
Our conversation is roaring past, and I always like to ask our folks a question about grace. Do you have an example you want to share with us, Lori?
You know, because of my son's situation, a lot of people know our story, and I contributed an essay to Jane Seymour's book, The Road Ahead. And I just want to read a couple of words because I've shared our story a lot. And as I write here, I consider us so very lucky. My child is a survivor. We have met many families who have not been so lucky. Our good friend, Joanne Mayo, whom we met through the pediatric cancer community, lost her daughter, Kaylin. She's the one I admire every day. I'm not the amazing mama. She is. Her daughter lives in her heart and her beautiful moon whenever she sees a Disney character, a hedgehog, or even a baby giraffe. That's bravery, facing each day when her oldest child will be forever 19. And I feel that my grace was to honor Joanne and to honor Kaylin.
It's a lovely story, and what fortitude that your friend has, and how wonderful to remember her, and to remember her each day, as you said, and that's an act of grace. You know, so often when we think of grace, it's transformative at Park, but it can also be simple transactional things, and yours is both a combination of the transformative effect that what you and Robert went through, and reminding of your friend, but also the simple things, and that's really what makes grace work for us. It's a gift, and we pass it along, and that's what makes it so special.
And people need to remember that life is short.
And
just don't know. It doesn't hurt to be nice, to smile, to say hello, to know people's names. Yeah. The people.
No, you remind me of my grandfather in the sense that he was an old PR person, and he always said, and he was a newspaper man. He said, names make news and people make pictures. And when I was a kid photographer too, and in those days it was a long time ago. And so I always liked these sullen looks and things like that. And my grandfather would say, "Get them to smile, won't you?" So, and that's so important.
It truly is. When the pandemic started, I gave out sanitizer and masks to my UPS guy, the Amazon delivery people. I asked them if they needed anything, just to show that I recognize them as people.
That's a daily act of grace. It's a simple thing. But you know what it is? It's deeper. It is an act of grace because you're treating them as not, quote, somebody who just, quote, serves me, but as a person.
Absolutely.
We all need that. We all need that now. Lori, you've been a terrific guest. And how can we find you?
My website is theprfreelancer.com, or ask John. He knows all my numbers.
Okay. And we'll put Lori's website in the notes for you too. You've been a great guest, and I thank
you so much.
And with that, we're going to go out.
Thank you.